The Norman and Florence Brody Family Foundation is dedicated to exploring topics of national and international importance and is proud to support Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff at the University of Maryland. From the University of Maryland, this is Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff. 10 years after the welfare reforms of 1996, more Americans are working, and welfare rolls have declined dramatically. But what kind of jobs are the so-called working poor taking to make ends meet? And more importantly, are they making ends meet at all? To find out, Policy Watch is joined by Barbara Ehrenreich, author of Nickel and Dimed, on Not Getting By in America. And now, the host of Policy Watch, Doug Besheroff.
Hi, I'm Doug Besheroff from the University of Maryland, and welcome to Policy Watch. Our guest for this program, again, is Barbara Ehrenreich, author of 13 books, including the topic of our discussion today, Nickel and Dimed. Barbara, welcome back to Policy Watch.
I'm glad to be with you.
Well, you've written this wonderful book. It's assigned in college classrooms. When I tell people that you're going to be our guest, they say, oh, nickels and dimes. So let me just ask you, what's the message of the book?
The message of the book is it's pretty hard to support yourself on the wages available to a lot of people in America. I tried in Nickel and Dime. This was immersion journalism. I actually went out and tried to support myself on the money I could earn just walking out into the work, into the world. And actually, the best jobs I can get walking out into the world are things like waitressing, being a maid with a cleaning service. These are the things I did, a Walmart associate, nursing home aide, hotel housekeeper. And average $7 an hour, very, very difficult, even for one person.
You should go through the math with us, but part of the problem was housing, right? That's what ate up most of your earnings.
Oh, yes. And I really had no idea how hard that was going to be. I had initially kind of budgeted around $500 a month for housing and utilities. Turned out to be way too low. Now, I was not, and I did this in 3 different cities, which did not include Manhattan and San Francisco and some of the obvious high-priced places. But housing was much more than that. I ended up often living in pretty bad circumstances in residential motels, the attraction of which is that you don't need the first month's rent and security deposit to get in and get a roof over your head. But those are not cheap. One of them was $1,000 a month, $250 a week, which was more than I was earning at Walmart.
Now, you were forced, in effect, because of your project, to take those kinds of rentals because you had to get started and you had to maintain your identity and so forth. Many other people, as you describe in the book, have someone else to rely on. They live with someone. But nevertheless, in the places that you described, there were people living and paying these really outrageous rents for what they were getting, what you were getting, $1,000 a month. Some of these places were pretty awful.
Yeah, well, that $1,000 a month place was a really creepy residential motel. I mean, it stunk of rodent droppings. There was only one little light bulb on the ceiling. There was no ventilation of any kind, and no way to no screen on the windows. If you had the window open because it was hot, anybody could just walk in off the highway practically and climb in your room. No fridge and no microwave, meaning all my food had to come from a convenience store or fast food, which is expensive, not to mention not real tasty. And I felt sorry for myself there. I just wanted to get out. And then I began to look around and observe the other people who lived there and realized that I was living in relative luxury because I had my room to myself. Other rooms were occupied by families for weeks at a time. Mm-hmm. And this means that one queen-size bed is also your dining room table, your desk for the kids' homework, everything.
who were these people? Because as I say, many of the people you worked with could go back to either husbands, boyfriends, or relatives, but the people you were living with in the trailer camps and in these motels, they were almost on a treadmill that they couldn't get off.
No, it's often the last step before the street is the residential motel, because they are expensive. But yeah, I mean, the first line of defense is to have other people who are earning a wage that you live with, spouse, whatever. Sometimes that can be a very a kind of tricky relationship if it's just somebody you've met at work. And I was surprised at how often people on a fairly kind of contingent basis would say, I'm going to be rooming with so-and-so. This is particularly hard for single moms, because people don't necessarily want to live with your babies, you know, or your kids. So, but if you don't have that kind of backup, or if you have a falling out with your roommates, then you are more in the situation I was in.
And that's the part that's so troubling, because there doesn't seem to be anyone to help those people. I remember reading your attempts to get food from public charities, and it did seem as if one needed to have a car, needed to have a telephone, needed to have a great deal of time, and not have a job, because these places were only open 9 to 5. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I tried to get emergency food aid in 2 different places. One was Portland, Maine. The other was in Minneapolis. And it was, you know, I'd start by calling United Way or the YWCA. I was also asking about, you know, places to live, like, you know, place where you could just rent a cot in a dormitory or something. And it, you know, it was so funny when, you know, one of them had said, well, we close at 3 p.m. Well, that's just great. I have a job, you know. The other one in Minneapolis was interesting. I finally ended up with some food there, a box of food, but it was almost all candy and cookies, plus some barbecue sauce. You know, nothing, I don't know what I was going to do with that. But one thing I learned there, you know, I was then working for Walmart. And when the social worker was interviewing me, she seemed to forget everything I told her as soon as I said it. You know, are you working? Yes. Or do you have a car? I'd say yes. And then she'd say, oh, you don't have a car. And afterwards she apologized and she said, oh, I was mixing you up with somebody else from Walmart who was here yesterday. And, you know, a light bulb went off in my mind then. That, you know, a lot of people, fully employed people, at low wages are dependent on charity to supplement those wages.
Not just charity. If you had been a mother with children, you would have gotten an earned income tax credit. You would have gotten food stamps. In some respects, to kind of sound, you know, scratch my head on this one a little bit, in some respects, the government subsidizes the low wages. And so it takes the pressure off the Walmarts of the world from having to offer a living wage.
Absolutely. And you know, when you apply for a job at Walmart, and this may be true, I don't want to pick on them. Well, I do want to pick on them, but you know,
big enough, it's all right.
Yeah, they can handle it. You know, one of the things you're asked to fill out is whether you are eligible for TANF, temporary assistance to needy families.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Oh yeah, they want to know anything you're eligible for, so you can get that to supplement your $7 an hour that you're making. So yes, they. This is why some states don't want Walmart in them anymore, and some cities have turned against them, because of the load they put on public and, you know, public sector services and private charity.
You ask the question, and you try once or twice, why don't people organize? Why aren't there unions? You talk about how they criticize unions from the moment you're hired, but
the employer does.
Employer does. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Yeah. I think the big answer to that is fear. It's fear that you will be fired for making any kind of a misstep. Now, this is true in white-collar America, too. You know, we work at will in this country, most of us, and that means at the will of the employer. You can be fired for having a funny expression on your face. You can certainly be fired for being a troublemaker. It is not legal to fire people for union activity, but they find another reason to fire. So people are kept in line by fear. Now, my next question is, well, so what? They throw you out, this job isn't worth much anyway, go get another one. What I didn't understand is that the less money you have, the greater the fear. Because you can't afford the transition between two jobs when you might go 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks with no check coming in. So the fear is intense to hold on to that job at all costs.
There are a number of people in Nickel and Dimed who just seem like a lot of fun, that they're having fun. One of them was named Barb. Barb. Every now and then you seem to be having fun at those jobs.
Well, it was hard. You know, physically it was hard. I was exhausted much of the time. And I'd say one thing in favor of emergent journalism. I found out how hard it is, you know, to have my legs feel like rubber at the end of a shift.
But be pretty proud that you...
But be damn proud that I'd made it through the shift, yeah. No, I enjoyed each job. It was a challenge. I liked the camaraderie of the people I worked with. I was enormously proud of myself for, you know, not completely screwing up in every case.
And as you point out, you know, we tend to think of these jobs as, quote, low-skilled. That's what the economists call them. But you actually found that it took a certain amount of not just energy, but thinking to do them well.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about waitress.
This is a very humbling discovery. I've written 12 books or 13. I have a PhD in biology. Well, that doesn't help you master the restaurant's computer ordering system in 15 minutes, like what you're given. Or my job at Walmart, where I was in ladies' wear. I thought, oh, wonderful, fashion advice, you know, I'll be doing that. And my job was to take clothes people had tried on and rejected, or that they had thrown on the floor, and a lot that goes on, or that for psychological reasons that are unknown to me, like to take from one part of the store and hide in the Bobby Brooks ladies' casual wear, where you have to dig them out. And so anyway, the point was I had to memorize the exact locations of hundreds of different items. Nobody trains you. You have to, you know, like know it immediately. And then those locations are rotated every few days. You're trying to do a good job, but you're up against management in this case. And that was true in other jobs too, like the nursing home job. I wanted to do a good job by these elderly people, these Alzheimer's patients I had. But if I have to take care of 30 of them, and I'm also scrubbing the floor, serving the meals, doing part of the cooking, doing all the dishwashing, you can't give the quality of personal service you want.
And you comment, and I was really quite struck, having had an elderly mother in a facility, not Alzheimer's, but in a facility for a while, how they hired you basically right off the street.
Oh, yeah.
No checkup, and there you were in there taking care of our parents and grandparents.
Yeah.
With no supervision of any serious sort.
Yeah, and you'd think that this would be a very important thing that we would value in our society, how we take care of the elderly. But you take somebody at $7 an hour or even less and just say, there, go do it. And you have to memorize, of course, all who is a diabetic, what other, you know, who can't have salt. You have to know all, you know, there's a life and death component to this. And so it seemed to me they were awfully casual about who they hire and how they treat the people they hire. Ditto for our child care workers, terribly underpaid.
Yeah. Now, you overheard a conversation when you were doing house cleaning. I love this math. I'm thinking maybe this is the business I should be in, but maybe the universities do it. You all were getting about $6.50 an hour?
Mm-hmm. This is as maids with cleaning service.
Cleaning service. But the homeowners were being charged $25 an hour.
Per person, for each of us. Yeah.
So there's $9 an hour unaccounted for, give or take $18.50 unaccounted for there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you all had a lot of supervisors and a first-class equipment that you used. That's what cost all the
we didn't have
extra money.
first-class equipment. No, it's not a low capital, it's not a big high capital industry. You've got your company cars to go around in, and you've got vacuum cleaners, but the rest is pretty much cleaning fluids and buckets.
And you worked very hard.
Yeah.
Not allowed, this was in Where was this?
This was in Maine.
This was in Maine, but a hot September.
It was, yeah, hot. It was very hot. And we were not, no liquid, nothing was to touch our lips during the time we were in one house. Now, you could be in one house for 4 hours, and no, we were not to drink water. I have never sweat so much, not even in the gym, as I sweat in these jobs, and yet we were not to drink water. Don't ask. I can't explain it.
You mentioned, you compare when you worked for those teams, and these are firms, and what you were paid to, I think you called them freelancers, but the mainly women.
The independent house cleaners, yeah.
Clean, and of course they make much closer to the 25. They don't make 25, but they might make $15 or $18 an hour or whatever. What was it that kept your coworkers at these $6.50 an hour jobs instead of whether they were $12 or $15 an hour independent jobs of house cleaning? What held them there?
Well, in many cases, so this wasn't true of my coworkers, it's because they are immigrants and don't speak good English, wouldn't know how to set up the contacts. But my coworkers were all English-speaking native-born Americans, in fact, white native-born Americans in Maine. And I asked them that, and they would have an explanation like, this way, you know, I don't have to set it up. If I get sick, or if I miss a day because a child is sick, I don't lose the client, although you will be punished by the employer.
That's fascinating.
You actually got your pay knocked down to $6 an hour for, I forget how long a period, 2 weeks, I think, if you missed a day. So, but that might seem like a better situation than losing a client because you have a child home with a fever.
And Portland is a big spread out, well, it's not so big, but it's a spread out city, and there isn't too much in the way of mass transportation and so forth. This company provided a car with the absence of...
And that was another thing, is that some women could get to the place where we took off from in the morning, the office, but they would not have had a car all day to drive around to houses, and they didn't have cars.
I was surprised about how much urine testing went on for these relatively low-level jobs.
Mm-hmm. Well, that more drug testing goes on among blue-collar people than among white-collar people. It's based on I don't know what it's based on, frankly, because there have been studies now that show that pre-employment drug testing does not increase productivity, does not reduce accidents, does not reduce absenteeism. But I think it is a way that the employer has of signaling, I'm in charge. My power extends even to your weekend. You know, there is nothing you can do, you know, recreationally that I won't know about. It's an intimidation thing. But it's also a bit of a joke because people know how to fake out those tests, too.
For many of these urine tests, it either cost money or there was a real investment in time. And it felt that you thought that that was also a way that the firms were tying people to the firm. They were raising the cost of working there or raising the cost of leaving to go someplace else. Did I read that right?
Yeah, it occurred to me because, and I would take these urine tests, you have to go somewhere. You'd have to drive to some little laboratory somewhere in the city. It could be a 45-minute drive. Now, that, you know, doesn't sound like such a big deal. But if you are, say, a single mom and you already have one part-time job, this becomes staggering. You know, how do you work that out to go do the test and take care of your child and get to the other job and so on? So it's an obstacle.
Yeah. Immigrants have come to this country. They take, I don't want to get into the trouble that the president of Mexico got into by saying taking jobs that Americans won't take, but they take many low-level, low-paid jobs. And within a few years, they've progressed out of them. There is some staying back, but poverty rates among Hispanics, for example, Hispanic immigrants, have declined even in the last recession. They're doing better. They're earning more. They're buying more houses than African Americans now in this country. What's the difference between those immigrants in the same jobs and some of the people you worked with? And what will it take to help the non-immigrants get on the same up escalator?
Well, I'm not convinced that all of the immigrants have that smooth or rapid path upwards. I saw, some of the worst cases of misery in terms of living conditions would have to be the immigrant workers, like in Key West, who are brought in by agents. This is often from Central Europe, brought in by agents who take $1 an hour out of their $7 an hour, and then these guys live in dormitories where you only occupy that bed while the other person is working his shift. It's a sort of, what do they call this, a hot sheet situation or something. A lot of I don't think too many of those people climb up from a dishwasher position. There's no ladder to go up at all. But one thing that some immigrant communities have is a lot of support. That there's a lot of concern. That if things fall apart for you, you have, if not more than extended family, you might just somebody who's came from the same town in the Dominican Republic who might take you in. So it's that kind of support, I think, that helps a lot.
And many, not all, but many of the non-immigrants that you worked with didn't have, you called some people better cushioned.
They didn't have much of a cushion. But then a lot of them did have extended families that they were very embedded in and did get help with. But, America has changed since, even 15 years ago. We don't have a blue-collar industrial workforce, jobs that offer people a living wage without a college degree. We just don't. We lost all that. Very little is left. Steel, auto, those things are going. So what we have is this huge low-wage blue-collar service sector where you're not going to ever earn a living wage unless things change quite a bit in this country, and where you are stuck and really trapped because there's not a ladder going upwards.
What policy or social or economic changes would you like to see happen so that those people, the Barbs of the world, can have a decent life?
Well, I do think we need higher wages. I think it breaks the social contract when you work very hard and you don't earn enough to live on, at least live on indoors, and that's what's going on. There should be no such thing as the working poor. That should be an oxymoron. If you're working, you should live in dignity and some degree of safety and comfort. So that would be one part of it. We need additional things that other countries have managed to do, like universal health insurance.
Maybe we'll get back to this with the questions from the audience. In the meantime, let me tell our viewing audience that you can contact us by email by writing to policywatch@UMD, that's UMD for University of Maryland, .edu. And now we'll take questions from our audience.
Hello, my name is Nina Shariari, and I'm a student of Professor Besharov's. And I had a specific question for Nickel and Dimed. You said that some of the people, your coworkers, were sleeping in their cars or their trucks. And I was wondering why they weren't taking advantage of the government programs like the housing subsidies, and what were their reasons? Was it discussed at the workplace, or?
There aren't many government programs to help the homeless or working poor people. The Section 8 housing vouchers will help you get into those like apartments or buildings that honor Section 8 housing vouchers, which isn't all of them. But mostly there's a severe shortage of those vouchers. The waiting list can be years long, and they've been cut back and cut back. That is effectively not a possibility. The other possibility might have been a shelter, but many people would rather sleep in their vehicle than in a shelter. So there's no help.
My name is Sanjana. I'm also a student in Professor Besharov's class. One thing we were discussing when reading the book, I thought of you in Nickel and Dime. You were somebody who would get out of this situation, but for a lot of people, it's their life. And could you just briefly discuss like the emotional health of people trapped in a low wage job with no way out?
Well, as I said in the book, I would not experience those feelings of being trapped in a low-wage job because I was actually a reporter, a journalist all the time. But I certainly have enough extended family members who have been in those kinds of jobs for long periods of time. And I would say the biggest psychological effect I notice is anxiety, because it does not take much to derail you. If your car breaks down and it's going to cost $300 to repair, if your child gets sick and you can't send her to the child care center and you miss work, you may lose your job. Anything that might be very small in the life of a middle-class person or an upper-middle-class person is a potential catastrophe. So it's the anxiety that I am most familiar with, although I was not personally experiencing it as a journalist here.
Well, on that note, Barbara Ehrenreich, again, thank you very much for coming to the University of Maryland and Policy Watch.
This program was produced by the University of Maryland, which is solely responsible for its content.
The Norman and Florence Brody Family Foundation is dedicated to exploring topics of national and international importance and is proud to support Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff at the University of Maryland.
We are PBS.